was owed to Jan.
Sorry to cut you off, Meaty. Jan is a really great facilitator. Yes. Like we've already mentioned once before, not your first rodeo. Yeah, you've got a really an innate and a developed skill set in sort of holding the center and making it all coherent. So
now I'm blushing. I know, Benji, you say that term once in a while when we compliment you. It's like that you're blushing. I'm blushing.
Just returning the favor, Jan. So if you guys, if it's all right, I don't mind hosting today unless somebody else would like to.
You know, Benji, I really value these Friday sessions as being sharing the load. I love your sessions where you're holding the space, but I do think it's important to have a space where we can kind of co-facilitate and evolve together. Is that a difficulty? Because I also want to support you in whatever feels good for you, but I think it really helps the group to have a variety of facilitation.
Yeah, I think that we've been pretty well. When I look back, it's almost as if, and this I don't think was intentional or pre-planned, but like every other session I've been hosting just about. That's what it's felt like for me. And so and I'm very happy with that. This definitely wants to be a shared space. And so, Meaty, are you offering to host today, or are you just surfacing this as a consideration?
I wasn't offering to host, but if I'm kind of landed myself in it, then I'm willing to do it. I think there are plenty of, if anyone feels inspired to host, then I will do it if nobody else feels inspired.
If you are hosting, there is one thing that I would like to just bring in before we do check-ins. And this sort of tacks on to the conversation that we were just having about exploring a variety of different ways that we can surface agenda items for this session. And I was thinking just broadly about these exploratory sessions and how we can sort of create greater coherence between the entire group. And I think that might sort of encourage more agenda items to surface. If we are all sharing our individual bioregional stories in the check-ins, I think that there's just a little bit of diffusion and fragmentation. And I wanted to surface the idea of inviting either a bioregional check-in or in your check-in, sharing what you're seeing in the emerging story from bioregional activators calls, from Bioregion and Beyond calls, from Vivero, from any of it, so that we can also see this ecosystem coming together, presence ourselves together in that story. And then maybe we'll think of, well, here's a bunch of things that I'd like to discuss in this session. You know, maybe bringing that forward will prompt us a little bit more. Does that make sense? So how does that sound, Meaty?
I'm just putting what I think I heard you say into the chat as a prompt for bioregional. Does that suit, Benji?
Yeah, I think it's good enough for an experiment.
Beautiful.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, I would just add to it anything where, if anybody does have a specific agenda item, then feel free to bring it in during a check-in. So who feels called to kick off? Welcome everybody. There are 10 of us here today, which is great. Maybe more will join. Anyone ready to respond to the prompts? Jan? Claire.
Go ahead, Claire.
Oh, that's okay. It's a competition. Yeah, I'm up in the Cowichan again, just really starting to connect into, like, really riding on the coattails of Brandy, who has amazing relationships in the community, and feeling as if, man, we're just kind of going straight into this work, which is fantastic. And just about to go and travel over to one of the smaller islands, Pender Island, where Ben Cadell, who has been, I think he's been to some of our sessions, and he has been the one running, helping to facilitate the lifeboat workshops. And he's phenomenal. Paul Chergino, who's in sort of Everett, Washington, as some of you know. So we're all kind of dotted around the Salish Sea. And we've been meeting, Ben, Paul and myself, just to talk about, how we can work together and bring in more people into that conversation. We're just trying to get our feet under us as to what those processes could look like. But one of the things that I've been invited to be part of, so it's a design charrette the whole weekend, but I guess it's a stewardship council of somehow connecting all of those dots. And that's what we'll be talking about today. And so that feels exciting, and looking forward to bringing that to others so that we can just trying to imagine, like, how do we share the information, work together, do it in a productive way where it's, sometimes if the group's too large, the emergent stuff, it's harder for it to happen. And if it's not enough people, anyway, all of that stuff, we're just getting into the middle of it. And it's pretty exciting. Also, just the other piece that's super exciting for me is just the conversation around using the arts within these processes is really coming to the fore. And I'm so excited. I have tried for so long to bring this up. And, it lands, but people don't get it in the same way that it's really, it feels to me that people see the potential within this work, because it is already exists. It's about connecting the networks, finding the others, and how do we hold that all together? And that's what the arts are brilliant at doing. It's holding it, and so long as the processes are kept alive, it helps to hold the aliveness. And it's very exciting to me. So I will pass on to Megan, who's in my Bioregional, and who's been part of this conversation with activating the Cowichan. So although so an agenda item, I don't know that I have anything specific, except that I guess if there is conversation around community arts and using the arts, I'm still trying to figure out how to communicate that and what would be useful. So I guess that's a sort of very vague question, but it's what I'd like to bring up. Megan.
Claire, maybe we can talk about the conversation that we had yesterday.
Yeah.
And the idea for the workshop, if you
sounds good. Yeah,
okay.
No, maybe you can, yeah.
Thanks, Claire. Yeah, hi, everyone. I just wanted to mention that, I joined the call on Wednesday where we were talking about pro-social and the origin story, and I just found it was so right. I apologize for not participating as much as I could, because I was as much as I would have liked to, because I was on the bus, but I didn't want to give up the conversation because it was just right. And those two things have been such a big part of what my current thinking is. So I just really loved that session, and thank you. So that was on Wednesday. Thank you, guys. And I think today I'm just thinking about sort of what processes do I want to be part of. I'm here in downtown Vancouver. And as I think I've said a few times before, it's hard to love the land here, being in the situation that I'm in. And I'm just trying to just still stay open and think about where is my commitment to the land going to be, sort of what place do I love? And I'm just exploring that. So I feel like I say the same thing every time, but it's still true. So, and I'll pass it to Jan.
Great. Well, I'm doing a kind of a slow dance here in my own bioregion in terms of wanting to move ahead to kind of do a gathering, and yet I do need to work with the Indigenous person that's and that's active in this area to some degree, but it's just that kind of you know, the assumption of, you know, sending a connection and a time and a place, and it's like, oh, that's all quite different. Emails work differently, engagement is different, so it's just like, so that's where I'm at. And I wanted to address a little bit of what we talked about last time, and maybe some of that will move into an agenda, but just the sense of, yes, this, I don't want to use the word region needs to be left for the land base, whereas this is definitely a cultural region that we're developing in our Zoom time together. The different senses that people brought up about the need for this space as being a place to speak about, try talk, I think was one term, as well as the sense of the loneliness of this work. And for some people, they're working on the urgency that's coming from bioregional activators to get out there, do this really intensive work, where, because, you know, the world is falling apart so fast, and other people are saying that's not the urgency they're being driven by. So it's like there's differences within this group as to what the motivation is. So how, and also it feels that there's, instead of just the going around and reporting, maybe I am going into agenda, how do we use this as an interactive space? Like, so I think the reporting on the bioregions is really, and our check-ins is really good, but how do we do the interactive a bit more? It used to be that if someone was wanting to talk more about a bioregion, they would maybe book the Wednesday session and could go into more depth about their own bioregion and then give feedback, and it was a more spacious time to do that. But now with the activators work happening, it feels the Wednesday session isn't as available for that. So then where do we do that? Do we just take a portion of the time here to be more interactive about what's happening in someone's bioregion if they want to talk about it more and get some questions and feedback? I mean, I guess in the agenda would be, how do we, for people doing more smaller work in their bioregions that maybe isn't part of the large bioregional activators plan, how do we give support, and where is that happening so that can be interactive? I mean, I just feel that was sort of raised a bit last time, and I just wanted to raise it up again into our potential agenda. And because there's so many things that even just what Claire and Megan have said already, that I think, oh, there's more there. Where do we get a chance to actually go there a bit more in depth without kind of giving it a bit of space and time and schedule? So to Trisha.
Jan, can I ask you just to check that the agenda item is accurately reflecting what you wanted it to say?
Thank you, that's good.
Thank you, Jen. And Claire, yeah, I'm really looking forward to hearing the arts coming up and hearing that coming into the context of how to bring what then I consider like a playfulness, right, into what we're doing. And it's interesting because just a couple of days ago, we had a group of high school students here that were working on a project with our local farmers, and they surfaced the very same thing where they were saying, oh, you know, this program that we're in is great, but it's a 2-week program, and we'd love to be able to do things throughout the year that incorporate arts and incorporate creativity and that type of exploration. So I love the synchronicities of that. Yeah, okay, bioregionally, lots going on here. We have a meeting coming up on Monday. It's going to be actually our third meeting of our council, the Council for the Regenerosa project. And yeah, it's interesting because we are definitely in this place of Jan, like you were talking about with calendars and scheduling, and like, how do we do this in ways where, you know, the digital people and the analog people are all taken care of, right? And all feel comfortable in the space. And where also, as we're dealing with people kind of dispersed in different areas, balancing that efficiency and that the various needs, like how we are able to work together. But I'm super excited about this next meeting that's coming up. And a lot of it has been a lot of kind of getting to know you, but this next meeting also, I think, because there has been more financial resources that have come into the project, it really encourages us to be moving simultaneously in various areas, right? So to be looking at those things as well as looking at our structure and looking at how we function together. And what I love about that is it really invites people to kind of move into the areas where their passions are, and work kind of in smaller teams to be able to then bring that back to the larger group, which I'm really anticipating is going to help to be like a trust building process, because everyone there already trusts one another and knows one another, but we don't have an intimacy with one another. But being able to do this thing, I think, will help to encourage that intimacy. And we have actually a bunch of volunteers that are leaving at the end of the month, and just reflecting on what that experience has been for us here holding the space, for them, how we've been really playing with the multiple forms of capital with them and actually taking them almost on a learning journey around it. And we developed this questionnaire with them around, you know, like, what was the capital that you brought in? What is the capital that you're leaving with? So we're also kind of developing this ritual where as people leave, we kind of have this going away meal with them and invite them to share those things. So yeah, things are going good. And things are also just really trying to sense into what are the streams to catch, to kind of pull onto, because there's just so many streams coming down. And so it's kind of like, oh, what are the red threads, you know, and like appreciating and recognizing the other threads, but not necessarily paying a lot of attention to them. So yeah, that's my check-in. And I will, and then just as far as an agenda, I love the idea of being able to sense into more what this space is here on Fridays, and that co-evolution of it, and the kind of like the emergent property that it has, where it's kind of like, because I really do feel in these sessions that we tend to be working with emergence, but is that kind of where we want to be, and yeah, having that conversation. So I'll pass it on to Pamela. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm not sure where to begin. There is an awful lot that is happening here where I am that doesn't fit into the bioregional activators basket. And I think that's the case with a lot of people here. And so I guess I think I'd like to sort of throw my 2 bits in for an agenda item that addresses the what place is there for the local, and the yeah, I'm going to just leave it at that for now, and I will pass to Rita.
Thank you, Pamela. Good morning, everyone. Let's see, it's just check in about our bioregion here in the Roaring Fork Valley. Things are loosey-goosey right now, and it feels like we're throwing a bunch of marbles on a table and going to see energetically where they are attracted to each other and come together to look at the possibilities that are happening here. And one of the things I wanted to tell Claire is helping that is the cover you did for Joe's book. When I show people the book, there's a pause. It almost seems like it takes their breath away, and they look at it and then they go, oh, yes. That's been the response I've had this last week as I've shared it with some folks here in the community who could be significant players in a project should that happen. So Claire, wonderful, thank you. And just feeling into what this space might be, I'm not sure. I don't know if I've been in a Friday meeting before, so I'm just going to have a close listen and pass to Preston, who's up in my homeland territory.
Do you mind if I just put one quick thing in, because I can't not, and Pam was such a huge part of putting the book together, the book cover and the book together. And it was with Pam and me working together to really work with the color, which was not coming up right and everything. So I know that's kind of out of line, but I just needed to put that in there, that there was a really strong collaborative effort on that.
Oh, thank you for letting me know that, Pamela. Now, when I show the book, I'll have you in my space too. So excellent.
Thanks, Rita. My first thought that comes to mind as we break into this check-in is I don't know how well it fits specifically to the exploratory session, but right now what I'm seeing is that everybody being at a slightly different place in this pathway, I think, is an incredibly good journey, at least for me. Seeing Trisha engaged very heavily deep in the process versus Rita, who's just, at that point where it's beginning to be explored, versus the rest of us who are more at that point of going, how is this even going to begin to translate? So I think that opportunity to see those footsteps and to sort of guide a little bit back and forth between guardrails is a very helpful aspect within this whole framework. A quick check-in is that, there's just so much going on. I'm holding a lot of what Joe talked about yesterday in the update, and I think it's very, very applicable, sort of with what we're talking about here. So I think it'll naturally come into the agenda as it is. So a lot of what I'm doing right now is I've went through the whole session or the whole itinerary for Toronto. It's very institutional. It's very fast-paced. I don't think it actually bodes well to the nature of Earth regenerators, but in the end, it is what it is. Don't want to take anything away from what's unfolding, because that's not the purpose. But what I'm doing is, I know a few people here and there that are sort of on the peripheries of things, architects that are trying to work with the advancements of what could be done better, urban fruit harvesters, a nonprofit reached out to them because they pick fruits and make juices and such, and they might be part of that urban story. Permaculture person I know who's far too busy, but she's very glad that I'm having these conversations within this group. So I'm trying to kind of connect a whole lot of people that are not strongly related in. They don't know me very well, but we're all sort of part of a loose thing, which is not that different than what's happening in Earth Regenerators itself. Now, what's going to gain traction, what doesn't, I don't know. And there's so many moving pieces right now. It's all a fog and a blur. But watching how this could become something, as Trisha's talking about, there's so much interest to me in that kind of process unfolding. So that's where I am, just sort of stewing in all of this massive amount of information at the moment and trying to play through it. RJ.
Thanks. I may have to go off at some point, but it's kind of the way things are. Talking about bioregion, what's going on here and elsewhere, is we're in the middle of a conversation about architecture of compost toilets in Pennsylvania and what is compliance, you know. So those are just the everyday things that are happening. And the interesting thing is it's not just, it's in the whole region that we're starting to talk about this because of a couple of situations that have come up, and you know, it has to do with building, you know. What I want to say about the overall thing that we're all going through is I love this bioregion of bioregions and the conversations that are coming out of that. And I see that as something really quite new that the Great Lakes perhaps and Joe and Benji and Penny are bringing to us. And it's a very exciting development. What I notice is that we're getting more, right at this point, we're getting more academics coming in, which is a different, it's almost like a little different conversation, and it's fruitful. And also, I think cities, we haven't talked a lot about cities in the sense that's coming out, because cities are a gathering place in the region. There's an awful lot happening there, and there's a lot of talent there. So that's something brand new. Not brand new, it's something new, a flavor that's emerging. And it'll be interesting to see pro-socially how we pull that together with kind of different languages and different perspectives. The other thing that I'm thinking, I'm going to call this youth, and I'm going to say it anybody under 30, because it's a different world, I think, for many, many people under 30, and children too coming up. They have quite a different perspective. And I think that needs, if there's an agenda item along with the arts, I think that needs to be a piece of that. Because they have connections through families, and they have connections to us. I won't say us, to me as an old person, and probably at times is confusing to them. But I see two things going on. One is they have a much wider global perspective than most of the generations. And they also have a very specific, because the energy is there, very often they have a very specific focus. Well, I just want to work on this. I want to build a permaculture plot, or buy a little piece of land, or, you know, or get really involved in this particular activist piece. And there's a wide ocean between that local and the global, and they have both. So how we help to bring that together, because I think they have so much to add. And if we don't include them, we're going to end up regretting it. If we get through the next 10 years, we'll be saying, why didn't we do this? So that thought, and we're seeing a little bit of that, but just to keep that in perspective, in one of those thoughts, how can we bring people under 30 in, including children who right now are growing up in it and, you know, have various views that maybe I don't have. So that's, I'll pass it on to, who did we miss? Did we miss anybody?
Benji and Midi.
I'll go to Benji.
All right, thanks, RJ. Yeah, wow, a lot of agenda items came up so far. A different level of energy than last week, maybe. Something to reflect on. As far as me, I'm sick. I've been sick the last couple of days, a little sinus thing going on. I'm very foggy, so I'm going to give this my best shot. Forgive me if it's not clear. So I'm here still, just continuing the healing journey. And I'm trying to sense into how, because there's so much going on right now. I'm trying to model the idea that I brought in initially of how, like, in the check-in, we can weave together what's emerging. And I guess I'll just go with a conversation I've been having with Penny. And this is regards to what Pamela brought in about focusing on the local. I'm thinking that this bioregional activation right now, we're looking at it through the lens of the landscape partnership. But as we talk with people in Paonia, as we talk with people who have interacted with Joe and Penny in these workshops before, we're finding that, like, so much of this is about the very, very local. It's about personal development, or whatever phrase you want to use for that idea. And it is about, like, just engaging at really small scales for a lot of people. So I think that's a big part of all of this. And Penny and I have been talking about potentially hosting workshops as part of the bioregional activators. Well, this idea has just come up because Penny focuses so much on collective trauma. And I think a big part of my story, excuse me, has been also overcoming myself, transcending myself. And so I think that we can bring an interesting sort of story and workshop around, well, how do we all develop as community leaders? How do we embody leadership, not as a role, but as a way of being? How do we focus on the local, and how does that grow into something bigger? These are all just really early ideas, but all of that was just an attempt to weave in what's emerging in the bioregional activators with what we're talking about here. And so I just wanted to share that, Pamela. And then as far as agenda items for today, I'd love to share what I have planned tomorrow for the session where we're sharing artifacts. It could be fairly brief. Just wanted to invite some comments. And then I wanted to just float an idea for what we might do in the bioregional catalyst while Joe and Penny are in the Great Lakes Basin. And that could also be pretty brief. So I've got 2, hopefully brief agenda items. And with that, meaty, last but not least.
Thanks, Benji. Well, I'll keep my input short because I don't have specific agenda items beyond what has already surfaced here and sounds a rich session. Here in my bioregion, we are post-atmospheric river ×9, physical collapse, cleanup. And for many people, that means recovering after quite drastic floods. For others, it means discovering their foundations have fallen away and their houses are no longer habitable. And for some, it means, my gosh, I need to be careful when I drive these mountain roads because rock falls, mudslides can happen anytime. So that's the California story in the Southern California, and I think pretty extensively through the state. It's been wonderful to see the sun again, and I'm so spoiled normally here for sun. Missing it for 2 weeks is pretty rare in California. And so that's I'm going to stay with that as my bioregional check-in. And just to say, I think there's a lot moving in the Earth Regenerator ecosystem. I think anybody who has done a project session in the Regenerative Project Incubator is warmly invited to during this coming season to share an update. I've already mentioned that to the OSA, the wonderful OSA people yesterday, and we'll be inviting other people who've done projects. I think one of the interesting things in 2023 as an interface in the ecosystem is to explore how we mutually support Regenerative Project Incubator and Bioregional Catalyst. I think there is a weaving to be done between these parts of the the Earth Regenerator ecosystem. And I think that's going to emerge in the space. I kind of see it. Tricia did this beautiful, what is going to happen in 23, which kind of inspired me. It felt she was playing the role of the prophet for a while. And so I'd like to prophesy that we're going to see a mutual support and development of project incubator and bioregional catalysts. Here's Pamela with her hand up. Pam.
Yeah, thanks, Smitty. Weaving with the, I really like what you're saying there about the weaving with the project incubator and the bioregional catalyst. And I'm interested too in how that weaves with the bioregional activators, because I think that's an important part to keep into the mix. But the reason I put up my hand actually was to kind of underline what Claire was presenting about the lifeboat metaphor. And I was at the recent one, the discussion, was it yesterday, 2 days ago, who knows, sometime this week. And that's pretty juicy. And I'm really interested in what Claire has to say and bringing forward something about that. So there's really an important, because that into what Claire is doing there, north of the Cowichan, I'm hearing about it here in this space. That's a really important cross-fertilization, because that's something that I'm trying to baby step my way into, because I'm not outgoing, I'm not a weaver type person, but I happen to be talking to a lot of people these days. And Lifeboat has been dropped into a few conversations and actually been receiving some interest. So that tells me that this space is doing its job with cross-fertilization, and that's a really important thing to make note of. And that's also something that with a project incubator, like the bioregional project incubator, it really needs to have a space in Earth Regenerators, because there is so much happening. It's going so quickly, not much time, need to practice, need to develop muscles, and get on without urgency and with pleasure and joy, connecting and doing what can be done both locally and here. Not missing the bioregional activators, but weaving it in as we can. Over.
Thanks, Pam. And you remind me, actually, one of the most interesting project incubator sessions was the lifeboat session with Ben Cadell. So I must follow up with Ben and invite him back. Thanks for reminding me on that. Maybe we just take a look at what's accumulated in the agenda items. Pamela's been very helpfully collecting the items in the notes. So the interactive space piece, the arts and the arts workshop sounded as though it had a lot of buzz. RJ's theme of how do we bring the youth in? How do we recognize their difference and bring them in together? The Benji wanting to share about the artifact sharing session tomorrow and the BC support in the Great Lakes Basin. That's a rich agenda item. What are we going to prioritize? Anyone got some ideas? Claire, your hand is up.
Sorry, that's so awkward trying to do this on my phone, because it was actually a response to Pam. So I'm not wanting to derail the agenda process. So should I just respond to her now? Or no?
Why don't we just take it here and then we'll get to the agenda?
Oh, so me responding. Okay. Sorry, I'm trying to put my hand down too. Anyway, no, I just wanted to say that it really, what I'm really realizing is that this is so messy in the sense that, you know, sometimes I just don't have time to catch up, to fill people in. I'm sort of really realizing that Megan, I've been wanting to keep her more in the loop, realizing that that hasn't happened, but there are these conversations that keep coming at me sort of sideways, and you just sort of run with it. And then you try and figure out how to kind of find the scaffolding that's going to hold the conversations that are happening in a way that feels transparent, that feels that it's giving agency to all of the different players that are involved. And I guess what I'm really wanting to say is, in the midst of all of that, that there needs to be kind of a gentleness with which we kind of hold these processes as they form. And what we're really trying to do is find some kind of coherence that we can learn from in terms of being able to distribute out, to learn together. So long as we know that's the intention, we're building this together. So I just wanted to put that on the table. Yes, and let's build it together.
Well, Claire, it's a beautiful segue into let's build the order of this agenda together. It felt to me, I don't know about other people, but it felt to me that there were some kind of quite specific items. And certainly in Benji's case, there's a time-specific item in terms of wanting to share about tomorrow's session. And then there's this much bigger session, agenda theme about how do we use this as an interactive space? How do we give support to the local activities? So I wonder, shall we start with the specifics? And it sounded as though the arts workshop idea might be a quite specific one as well to bring in early. Who's ready to launch in? Benji, do you want to speak to tomorrow's session first?
Yeah, I certainly can. And you know, maybe the thing to do, because tomorrow's session, in my description, my sharing of the agenda could lead into community arts, the community arts workshop, because they're related. And perhaps I can really briefly just share an idea that I have for how we can support the bioregional activation process in the bioregional catalyst. So I'm thinking about, is that all right if I do it in that order? Okay, great. So as far as when Joe and Penny are in the Great Lakes Basin, I think there's going to be several Zoom calls that we'll be invited into to participate in. And so I have this hesitation to throw more onto the pile, like have more workshops. It seems like it'd be a lot. And so my thought was, why don't we just host a bunch of campfires? So there's campfires that anybody can go to, and Joe and Penny can easily point in our direction at every or whenever it comes up at workshops and conversation. And they can come and they can meet us and they can meet each other. Really importantly, they can meet each other. It's so important for people in the Great Lakes Basin to interact with others there. And I just think it's such an interesting opportunity for us to be there as well, to bring in what we've been learning and build coherence as far as the wider ecosystem. And that way it's also from like a management perspective, it's easy because there's no planning necessary for campfires. We just show up, we just tell them what they're all about. And then, you know, if a bunch of people, if there's a large group of people that show up, then we break out into breakout rooms of 6 or 8 people and have a conversation, come back together. And so I think that feels good to me. And I'm just curious what everybody else is thinking. Does that feel like a good approach for the 2 weeks that they're there? Just do campfires on a regular basis and make sure everybody's aware of the Zoom meetings that we can join in on. I'm seeing thumbs up from Claire. Maybe this one doesn't even need discussion. Thumbs up. All right. Okay. Great. Well, that was easy. Meaty, please.
Yes, taking my facilitator hat off for a minute. what are you specifically suggesting, Benji, that you're going to actually schedule some additional campfires? Or are you asking that campfires that already exist, which I think are in the Pacific time zone, they're Thursday afternoon at 4 and Sunday morning at 8. Are you suggesting that those become the events, or is it a mixture of both?
I think it would be a mixture of both. I think the Wednesday session that I usually host and the Saturday session that I usually host could just become campfires for this 2-week period, perhaps. Yeah, Claire.
Sorry, it's so hard on the phone. Yeah, I just wanted to say that I think something that I know from, especially doing like the community art projects where you're trying to build the conditions so that people can share. I just see so much in terms of sharing the culture that's developed here as valuable to the processes that are going on the ground. And yeah, I mean, we've talked about this metaphor so many times, sort of building the aircraft while we're flying and all of those kinds of things. And I think that there is something really valuable in terms of modeling the emergence of that, where you're participating in the conversations. And it's also a way of connecting. Most of us here know how lonely it's been. To connect with others who are having these conversations is like, there's that real value. So I just, yeah. So anyway, just wanted to add that in.
Thanks, Claire. Preston, your hand's up.
Yeah, I think, if I understand correctly, really what Benji's approaching is just loosening things up a little bit in the sense of the protocols, because at some level, we really don't know what's going to happen over that 2-week period. We could have a fairly big influx of people, or we might not at all. And I think because one of the things I've been sort of struggling with a little bit has been putting out little posts here about the itinerary for Toronto, but then I'm also putting out that there's a separate Earth Regenerators events that are virtually online. Now, anybody who's trying to track any of that's not going to know those kinds of details. And so I think that it could be potentially people just stumbling in. And if you're stumbling in and you don't have time, I think that if there's flexibility that we sort of step back from a rigidity and kind of just walk people through a little bit of what the whole sense of this is, that there's these two different things that are kind of unfolding simultaneously, and which part of what might fit somebody. It's a very fast learning curve to try to absorb potentially over that time period. And if that doesn't happen, then we still have the structure of what could be happening based on the standard bioactivators kind of approach. So I think it's a good mix in that potential that way.
Great, thank you. Jan.
So I'm going to head into some deeper water here. So sorry, Mitty, I know that makes sometimes it difficult for a facilitator when one of the agenda items becomes through. But I feel there's a process comment I want to make here, as well as a yin yang comment. And it's sort of about, and maybe I missed some meetings where this was discussed, but it feels like there's a huge role that people who have been doing this work for quite a long while in Earth Regenerators offer for those people that are coming in new, because there's this sense of holding the culture that we know is so, so absolutely valuable for doing this work. But I don't feel, maybe I missed it, but I don't feel that there was a clear recognition or invitation, or it feels as if it's been more assumed that people who've had this experience and been holding this space a long time would somehow just be there for the influx of newer people in different groups. And it feels that it's back to quite often how people who do sort of like the women's work, that you hold together the capacities and you weave and you do the yin relational work but it doesn't get recognized as being as significant as out in the world work. So we're holding this space. And so, yes, I think we've got we have that capacity, but I do not want it to be assumed, and that it hasn't come from a lot of capacity and work, and that we'll just show up and be there for these campfires or meetings or gatherings to be able to kind of help midwife the new people. Not that there's any resentment. I think we're doing this in order to do this work, but there's something about that role and something about the yin yang, which is a little bit maybe where the bioregional activators and catalysts have sort of, maybe there's a little dance that we're working with in there. So I don't know if any of that made any sense, but it just feels like I wanted to raise up a bit of a tension that I think is laying there. And I see a couple of hearts, so I guess I've spoken to something some other people understand, and I'm hoping, Benji, that makes sense to you. I'll get off the pedestal here.
Yeah,
Benji, I saw you. I just wanted to check, Benji unmuted. Did you want to respond instantly, or can you wait to hear Pamela?
I can certainly wait, yeah.
Thanks, Benji. Thanks, Meaty. Thank you, Jan. I really appreciate your mentioning that, because there has been a sense of earth regenerators being out of the conversation. And I think it's really important that exactly what you were talking about, especially in terms of the culture that has been held here, perhaps not being recognized. I just want to say I really appreciate you bringing that up. And I think it's all to the benefit of the relationship between the activators and the regenerator spaces, that there is a link, and the link, I think, has been going kind of in one direction rather than it being recognized as a dialogue, not, yeah. Over.
Go ahead, Meaty. Yeah.
No, I'd love to hear you, Benji.
Yeah. Frankly, I don't exactly know how to respond. I like hearing this. It's good to be aware of what's going through everyone's minds. I would say that I have a feeling for what's rising up, but I can't articulate it. It's still kind of unclear to me what exactly is being asked and what is being raised. It's just a tension and a discomfort. So maybe there's more elaboration. Claire, I don't know if you want to elaborate more, or whatever it is you have to say.
Yeah. I'm wondering, because I do think we're feeling into this, but I am wondering, I think from an evolutionary perspective, there's all the stuff that's happening, and there's sort of a congealing that happens when all these conversations and the work and the stuff happens. And then you get to the next point where you're ready to launch to the next place. And that's the evolutionary process. But all the stuff is messy, and it doesn't have specific people that it can be attributed to. And sometimes there are people that are the storytellers that take those stories forward. But I guess there's a, as someone who has worked in that space where I'm helping to take stories forward, there is a discomfort of that being attributed to me because it's been a whole collective of people. So there's a way of just acknowledging this, the process, rather than it being attributed to a person. And I think our society does that a lot and needs somebody to name, and especially, and so it's as simple, it's not a big thing, but it's as simple as acknowledging the process and the people that have been part of getting to that place. And then it's like I can just relax. And I know when I've been part of that process and I haven't been named or haven't been acknowledged in a way that attributes the fact that I was part of those processes, that feels, and you start seeing that only certain things are being named, you know that something's being betrayed in terms of how you got to that place. And that's what I'm hearing and what, is coming forward. I'd love more conversation on this, but I actually think this conversation is really important because it says something about the society in which, the conditions and the culture in which we're operating. Yeah, please go ahead. I can't seem to make my phone switch on and off.
Thanks, Claire. Once again, I'm taking off my facilitator hat and I'm speaking as MIDI. I have this sense of reliving the fable of the tortoise and the hare. And I had that sense this week in listening to I don't remember whether it was the Wednesday meeting or the Thursday meeting. I think it was the Wednesday meeting that Joe was leading, where he was acknowledging that his body was playing up, and that whole issue of, rushing to activate 100 bioregions can't actually probably be done logistically or emotionally, spiritually, easily by Joe and Penny being constantly on the road. And I had this sense of the land speaking through Joe. Now he's back in Barichara and saying, hey, you need to be here. And his daughter speaking through him, saying, you need to be a daddy. You need to be an active, present daddy. And then Joe saying, effectively, we acknowledge the importance of earth regenerators and what that is holding for what we can do. And I just see this sense of, we raise a lot of hairs in earth regenerators. And I'm constantly feeling this sense of, I need to allow the hairs to run and do what they do, because if we let the hairs run, they will find their own learning and their own rhythm and their own process. And at the same time, I need to acknowledge my role in this as being one of the ones who stays and holds the field in which the hares can jump up and run. And I noticed the messiness inside me that Claire speaks to. I'm feeling it most intensely these days with the various aspects of Vivero, which is where my passion is lying at the present time. And seeing that there are times when I'm a Vivero hare, and then I'm an Earth Regenerators Fund space holder, and then I'm suddenly in a group which is seeing, oh my gosh, Vivero is so much bigger than Earth Regenerators, and it can't be impeded by the little MIDI. So it's all of this is alive in me, and the messiness is in me, and all I can do is kind of show up and be as transparent as I can be and try and see where and how I can be of service. And for now, I need to put my hand down and go back to putting on my facilitator hat and invite whatever input is due to come next. Trisha.
Yes, tortoise and hare, yin and yang, and cultural conditioning. I kind of see all those things at play here right now. And even at play here, when we're talking about the bioregional catalyst space, like as you were all speaking, I was thinking, that's what it is. And maybe that's why I'm so comfortable here. It feels like a tortoise space to me, these Friday sessions. It feels like the space where we come, where we share, where we reflect, where we, where we put aside the kind of urgencies and sink into the emergent that's coming, maybe through our urgencies in other spaces, or maybe just through what's becoming present. And I find myself so much so, especially lately, like, just in the messiness of all of it, finding myself as the tortoise, as the hare, as I don't even know what sometimes, that maybe the chameleon, I don't have another animal yet, but where it's all of it, and we are in that complexity. And so having space, I think that's one of the reasons that this space becomes so sacrosanct to me in a way, is because it's like that space to just like step out of that urgency and step out of that confusion, or be in the confusion, but with others that can allow me to kind of untie the knots a little bit more. And so, I think this really feeds into that question of, with the confusions around, okay, like what's the space for me as I'm feeling into my energies of like where I find myself drawn to being. I think I find myself drawn to being in this space because it allows me to be in the somewhat of the tortoise space. And then when I think about it, maybe being a space that gets hair-like, then I get maybe a little bit anxious. So thank you for allowing me to just have that that stream of consciousness thought there.
Maybe it's a moment just to breathe. A little space for breathing. So since the tortoise and hare have come into our conversation, maybe we can actually welcome them in as beings, our relations, and invite tortoise wisdom and hare wisdom into the space. We seem to have flowed from the specifics early on, with Benji's suggestion around campfires, to the more general question of how we actually occupy and share this Friday space. And I wonder are there any hair items that really need to be addressed before next week's session? Benji, do you feel you've been heard enough on your own agenda items?
On that one, I've been heard. Yeah, certainly been heard. Still trying to understand what's been said. And wondering, where the discomfort, where the tension lies, and why. Is it around this Friday session? Is it around everything that's going on in the Bioregional Catalyst? I'm still trying to get clarity on it in so far as it then guides my own process and my own way of thinking. Because frankly, I'm still quite confused, to be honest. I don't quite see I don't see it's really hard to articulate. This is like, and I think a lot of this is because we're in abstract space and we're talking about on the ground stuff. And so, and we have these relationships that are coming together in abstraction. And I think that there's something to that as well, you know, because things go unsaid, things go unseen. We don't share day to day together. So I want to surface that as well. I think that that's a big part of this. But yeah, I hope it's okay that I'm just kind of confused because I don't know if I can, and I'm somebody who also processes things that are big and complex fairly slowly. I might have something to say in like 2 hours, but right now I'm just kind of wallowing. Claire.
It feels like, I just want to say, Benji, it feels like you're in tortoise space in the moment, and I want to honor that. Sitting with the confusion is actually an integral aspect for me of tortoise space. So I thank you for being willing to articulate it. Claire.
Yeah, I know I've spoken a lot, but I do feel like I just want to bring this piece in. And that is just acknowledging what I have been so grateful for with what Benji has brought to the space in his taking the conversations and helping to frame them into some kind of scaffolding that holds those conversations, that allows them to go to the next place. And it's that sort of messiness and then taking it further, and messiness and taking it further. And so there is a kind of tension that I feel is here. And so I agree with you, just sitting in the tension, but just acknowledging the huge gratitude that I have for somebody who, like Benji, who has put that, because it has taken an incredible amount of carrying that, writing it up, not always getting responses, not always getting, he's carried that. And then also working more closely with Joe, who is speeding ahead. There's sort of being in that middle space between all of that and holding that tension as well. I don't want to speak for Benji, but that's what I'm observing, and but mostly just wanting to acknowledge in the midst of, he's not, and I'm sorry, I'm going to say this because I think it also needs to be named, is not earning an income from somewhere else. This has been his work. And there is like a huge mission drive in this. And that's the sense of responsibility of carrying that. I am speaking for Benji and I shouldn't be putting words in his mouth. So but it's what I've observed and what I'm so grateful for, but also that tension, so.
Well, I think you're speaking for many of us in your appreciation of what Benji is holding. And it also does seem to me very natural in infrastructural terms that if there is a place within Earth Regenerators that is going to hold the tension of bioregional activators, ER interface tensions, it's going to be here in bioregional catalysts, which Benji has done so much to shape and form.
I really appreciate that, both Claire and Meady. And I wonder if there's some sort of reframing of spaces that we can explore to make relationships and expectations more explicit, to make the shared participatory space very explicit, to make the spaces that I'm hosting with more of this mission drive to bring clarity to the story, to create the mutual learning spaces. And I'm responding to what I'm sensing. I'm improvising. I'm just going, because there is a need to just go. And it can be very clear that that's what I'm doing in these spaces. And so we don't feel this sense of betrayal or not being included because that's been laid out. That's part of the story. Am I making sense?
What I'm hearing as I listen to you, Benji, is a talking for a kind of revisit of the design infrastructure of bioregional catalysts. I don't know whether that's what other people are hearing as well, and getting clarity through the design infrastructure exploration. Jan.
Yes, I think that's what we had been, that's why the topic I think got raised last time and then again this time is like, what is this space? How does it relate? How is this space different than the bioregional activators? And I think, Benji, you've been bringing the bioregional activators energy into bioregional catalysts wonderfully. And I mean, it's like the amount of work you're doing, absolutely all the things that Claire said, huge amount of work, huge amount of thinking through, huge amount of supporting a huge movement that's happening both in our own groups, in our own selves, but in the world. But it's like how those energies have come together and how they have been inclusive of all the voices and the impacts of those that I think you're naming very clearly now. It's like, yes, how do those work? And I think that's what we've been maybe naming over the last 2 or 3 sessions, is that there's a different energy in those. So I think it's just like, exactly, it's why we raised it into this space, is there is a need for understanding the difference of energies, but how they relate and how we just keep being aware of that. Not that there's going to be probably a real clear, this is this and this is that, but and not, yeah. And anyway, so I'm very willing to talk with you personally further on this or in here or whatever, but absolutely not about it not being completely appreciative of you and what you're doing and the amount that you're doing from the place of, you know, not having income to do this and not having a place to live and dealing with your own health and that. But not just those, but the incredible long-term gift and commitment and skills that you bring to this work.
Thanks, Jan.
I'm noticing we've got another 15 minutes. Preston has his hand up. Gosh, Benji, I love you. Just has to be said at this moment. We've got a couple of themes that haven't yet been explored, and maybe one of them speaks directly to the question of infrastructure, which is how we hold space for the local, and then RJ's theme about youth. And so I just want to name those and then hand to Preston to say whatever is coming up for you.
Sure. So I wasn't fully listening after I spoke. I was trying to summarize a little bit to put it into the notes. So I might not be completely framing this correctly, or however, my thoughts were that a catalyst space, particularly if you think about from a chemical reaction perspective, is a very energetic, complex, difficult space as things change. It's not a pleasant place to be. And so it seems to me that the line between activators and the abstract is a place of discomfort. It's a place of change management, because everybody's moving at different paces and at different moments. And so this is, I don't imagine ever being a really great space to try to work with. And I expect there to be confusion and tension. And that's sort of the nature of that being in my mind anyway. So I just thought I would sort of touch on that a little bit. And then, yeah, that's where I'll leave it.
Thanks, Preston. Yes. I'm reminded of all the stuff around middle space, because it's also middle space where we're kind of in midair. We don't have our grounding. It's easy if you're in a hierarchical system where the top has one role and the bottom has a role, and the middle bit is just about linking the top to the bottom, but in this diffuse, unknown space that we're occupying, it's very, very different dynamics as well. That's how it feels to me. Well, where do we go from here, peeps? Do we spend a bit of time talking about how can we give support to the local? I'm not sure where we go from here. Does anyone have the thread for the next piece?
I certainly want to give some space at some point. It doesn't have to be today, because I feel like what I'm doing has been sort of the center of attention for a very long time now. But the community art piece, I think, is just so alive right now and so important. Maybe next Friday we can plan on speaking about that, because Claire and I had a great conversation yesterday. I'm just so excited about this topic. And Jan, this brings in your experience in theater and improvisation. I mean, there's just several people in the community that will have an opportunity to share their knowledge and wisdom. So I just wanted to surface that.
Preston.
Preston, you're muted, my friend.
I think it ties in to this. Yesterday, Joe talking about using stones as a process of embodiment to change the nature of how people were making decisions about finances. And I saw it as an incredibly important process, because we're very abstract thinking, and we also live within a society that has very heavy structures. And in my mind, the process of embodying these changing approaches is incredibly important. I think art is a large part of that journey. And so having stories that are very tangible around being able to translate these abstracts into very practical, process-driven, step-by-step things that can be then done at the local level. So Benji's asking for an artifact tomorrow, and that's part of a story, and engaging with people with stuff that they're thinking about. What is in my backyard? What is in the creek area? What are these things that, you know, connect us through? And so creating those embodiments through art, through theater, through play, I think is an incredible part of this journey of translating that abstract into those realities. So anybody that didn't see Joe's thing yesterday, going through a very complex abstract to a real tangible set of solutions, I think it's worth revisiting that recording.
Great idea, Preston. Jan.
Well, just in response to the agenda right now and where we might go, I think something about how do we create space in this time for someone who might need a bit longer, like the art piece, so that we, and or the needing to do some talking about a specific area or a specific issue that someone's working with. And so how do we, and I'll go back to, because we were using the Wednesday once in a while for someone to do that. And so how do we create an interactive space where somebody has, in Friday then, how do we do that so that someone can delve into something more, either because we really want to learn about it. It's like, come on, like all this stuff going on in college, and I'm dying to know, loving to know more about the art project, loving to know more about what RJ is dealing with in terms of that community. Or maybe someone is saying, like, I'm just at the beginning, I'm not quite sure what to do. These are some things I'm thinking of. What do you guys think? I need to practice the talking about it. So some of those pieces, how do we, maybe that can be, I don't know if we can talk about much more today, but maybe that's where we've come to, how do we, within the relating and kind of the check-in, how do we also divvy up some longer chunks of time for someone to check in more about what they're doing locally?
Thanks, Jan. The thing that just popped into my mind as you were talking was the notion that if we're always talking in the Friday space about how we use the Friday space, we're going to actually get a little bit weary of constant process talk. And one of the things that the project incubator has done is to have a regular full moon session, which is process talk about the incubator or some other kind of process talk. And in between sessions are projects. And I just wonder whether that might be transferable to the Friday explorations. I'm seeing lots of feedback on that. Wow. Well, that just emerged through the cracks of the pavement, didn't it? Okay, let's hold that then as a possible way forward. And let's hear from RJ.
Yes, and I've been trying to listen in. I think I've heard most of what's been talked about. On youth, I think I can say fairly briefly, I believe that connects very much to the arts in the interactive piece. And I think if we keep, I know Claire keeps that in mind, artists keep that in mind. If we keep that in mind, that's one way of bringing youth, bringing all the range of the generations and bringing the community together in the right spaces, which then will draw out the conversations and trust and interaction. The other aspect about that is I think about universities. That's a common contact where I have youth at the right age where they're respected by and looked up to by the younger youth very much. At the same time, they have the ability to influence, if we let them, out of the top-down academic piece, and some academics do that quite well, to have their space to say and to really bring their thoughts in. But I think that's a lot at the local level. It's and it's a lot with the arts and the community piece. And as long as we're doing that, as long as we're really including the whole range of generations and all the energies that are there, without saying, oh, well, it's too messy, or let's get into the great detail and solve your particular issue. If we look at it as the community locally, that will solve a lot of what we're talking about when it comes to youth. So I'm fine with that being part of the overall local conversation. And I hope I'm saying that for others as well, but I could be wrong. So that's it.
Thanks, RJ. Well, we're just under 5 minutes left, 4 minutes nearly. It feels as though we've kind of reached a point where there's a suggestion that we explore the community arts piece in much more depth next week. Are you actually suggesting a workshop or talk about a workshop?
It would be talking about a workshop idea that Claire and I have just begun co-designing.
Beautiful. So can that be an early agenda item next week for next Friday's session? We give whatever time it needs. What kind of time do you think it might need, Benji? Claire.
Yeah, Claire, is there anything else you'd like to add?
I think the thing that I have struggled with is I have actually done some presentations to other groups on community art, but I realized, I was thinking about this, the work we're doing in like this work, it's such a natural next step or resonance with the group, whereas sometimes when I presented it, I've kind of just thought that it was because I wasn't able to present it, because it wasn't received in a way that I felt that it had landed there. And so I guess I'm a little timid about how I present it. And so working with Benji, just to make sure that I can actually present it. And I guess that's an incubation kind of period but anyway, I just wanted to put that out there, is that, I've just not known how to present it in a way that was effective. And yeah.
as a little experiment tomorrow in the context setting for the session where the Great Lakes Basin is sharing artifacts, I'm going to share some of the things that you taught me, some of the insights that you shared with me yesterday, Claire, around the value of community art and how it can really hold the center of bioregional learning. And I'm going to try to tie a connection between all of that. And as we share artifacts, we're kind of stepping into that a little bit.
That's great. That's wonderful.
So it'll be a little experiment. We'll see how it goes.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. What time's your session tomorrow, Benji?
10 a.m. Mountain.
Okay, great. And so do we have agreement that we're going to explore community arts next week as a deeper theme in this Friday exploration session? Is everybody going with that? I'm seeing lots of thumbs up. And RJ, I think you're our last contributor for a one-word checkout. Maybe you could give out your one word at the end of whatever you'd like to share.
I always forget to lower my hand. That's my one word checkout, and I'll try to remember.
So maybe pass it on, Benji, with your one word checkout.
Did you say my name? Oh,
I said Ben.
Okay.
I said Benji and saw RJ. I'm totally confused now.
Well, me too. Confused, but at the same time, but going slow enough that that's okay. Pamela, how about you? How are you feeling?
I'm feeling positive anticipation for what's ahead, and I will pass to Tricia.
2 words, love and respect. And I'll pass it to Preston.
Transition, abstract to tangible. Megan.
I would say my words are sort of excited and experimental. I will pass it to Pamela.
Pamela's gone, so
Thanks,
would you like to
Megan.
pass?
Yeah.
So maybe Claire or Jan?
Okay, I'll go. Yeah. Really excited. I can't wait to get more of this conversation going. And sorry, was it, gosh, who was the, Midi, have you gone? You haven't gone.
I haven't gone. I'll go. Deeply grateful, and I'll pass to Jan.
The messy quickening of a log jam that's moved.
Thank you, everybody. I think everyone's gone, haven't you? Yeah, haven't we? In which case, have a beautiful weekend and looking forward to tomorrow's session, Benji. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks all.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Beautiful
Thank you,
weekend.
Midi.
Thanks, Midi.
Bye-bye.
Bye.